We will defend the right of the American people to know the full facts about the population, size of citizens and non-citizens in America. I am hereby ordering every department and agency in the federal government to provide the Department of Commerce with all requested records regarding the number of citizens and non-citizens in our country.
President Trump did an about-face by deciding not to pursue adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census. The effort had already faced a share of legal challenges. A refresher on the background of the case: the Supreme Court ruled the citizenship question is legal, but that the justification used to include it was not.
Meanwhile, in Maryland, new evidence has been entered into the record for a still pending and somewhat similar case. It seeks to prove a potential racial motivation for the question. Joining us to talk about the legal hurdles the Trump administration may have faced had they pursued adding the citizenship question is former federal judge Walter Kelly. He heard cases in the Eastern District of Virginia for 4 years, and he is now a partner at the Housefield law firm. Judge, great to have you, sir.
Thank you.
What did you make of this about-face yesterday? This was a bit of a surprise.
It was, because everybody expected an executive order that was going to impose the citizenship question irrespective of the Supreme Court. I researched it in anticipation of appearing here today, and I didn't see a chance in the world that it would sustain. So I thought it was actually a pretty smart move.
So, Judge, just explain why it would have basically been an affront to the Supreme Court for them to try and give a new justification to them, given the Chief Justice's decision here.
Well, I think number one was the optics. It looked like you had a Supreme Court ruling and you were essentially evading it. There actually is a legal path. Executive orders are not reviewed the same way as agency actions. They're given a lot more deference. You don't have the notice requirements and all of the things that you have to do for an agency action. The trouble was here is that you were going to have an executive order ordering the Secretary of Commerce to do that which the Supreme Court said he hadn't done appropriately. And it was kind of too clever by half, and it just wasn't going to work.
What could they have done from the start to make this dream a reality?
I don't want to be flip, but tell the truth. Actually, you know, as both the dissents and Justice Roberts' opinion for the court said, there are perfectly good reasons to have this. It had been done before. The United Nations recommends having citizenship questions in the census. The administration came in thinking this was important, and what Chief Justice Roberts seemed to say is that's okay. But I think they felt like they had to kind of vouch up the case a little bit, and so they went out and solicited from DOJ and from other agencies people who were going to try to say, well, we need it for this reason or we need it for that reason, and it just didn't ring true.
And I think can you just explain, Judge, why it's important to the Supreme Court that these types of agency actions are, that the actions behind them are given muster?
Well, there is judicial review of most agency actions. And if you're going to have a situation where people are going to do things and not really say the reason for it, but try to evade it, then you're essentially gutting congressional legislation, in this case, the Administrative Procedures Act. And the Supreme Court is in the business of trying to figure out and then do what Congress intended, not allow people to evade what Congress intended.
Right.
We also wanted to ask you about some news that came down yesterday. House Democrats approving subpoenas for a number of very high-profile individuals, among them Jeff Sessions, Rod Rosenstein, John Kelly, Jared Kushner, notably, and Corey Lewandowski. How much ability does the White House have to exert executive privilege here in this potential testimony?
A lot. And I think the important part here is less the merits of less the merits than it is the timing. These things take a long time in the courts to try to work through about whether executive privilege was properly asserted or not. And in the meantime, nobody's getting any testimony.
Right.
And so running out the clock would be the best way of putting it. In the case of Mr. Lewandowski, I don't know what it is they're after, but if it's anything from the campaign, as opposed to time in the White House, and he wasn't in the White House,
Right.
then the campaign is not subject to executive
But
privilege.
he
that's the
was
real
the
question.
one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he was the one in the Mueller report who apparently what he was asked to draft. He was asked to communicate to Sessions to step down. There was something involving, I think that's what it was, involving him in the Mueller report, where he was not part of the White House, but he was being asked to sort of communicate this message to DOJ.
I would think that the claim of executive privilege on that would be pretty speculative.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think that, getting a third party to basically go be your bag man.
Right. Who's
doesn't
not officially part of the administration.
No, that doesn't seem to fly.
I'm not going to cut it.
Well, I think that's the most interesting question here, which is where does executive privilege count? And really, where do you see this going? Because it's going to the Supreme Court. Do you think that the Supreme Court is going to uphold the White House's position on executive privilege?
Difficult to say until it plays out in the lower courts. I question whether it'll ever go to the Supreme Court because you'll have an election here. What is the election, 18 months off?
Yeah.
And will it all be mooted effectively? What if the Republicans take back the House? All this stuff will be dropped. I don't know. Ultimately, if Trump gets reelected and the Democrats remain in control of the House, I guess it has the potential to get there and likely will get there.
Yeah.
So you think the run out the clock strategy will in fact be effective?
Yeah, no, I think it's a pretty good strategy.
We've
Well-
got Mueller testifying next week, and do you have any insight into what we may get out of him, whether we may get anything consequential that's outside of the Mueller report?
I would doubt it. I don't know him. He appears to me to be the consummate professional, and I think you'll get little more than name, rank, and serial number. They'll ask him, it'll be like deposing an expert in a civil case. You ask him a question and he'll go to the section of the report that deals with it and reads it to you.
Right, and I think that's the excellent point, and that really does show about why this is even done in the first place. Many of the Democrats are saying, well, that's the whole point. We just
want them to read it out
not
loud,
enough people
basically.
paid attention to the Mueller report, so let's have him come here and
yeah.
read it.
Apparently,
Yeah.
a lot of members of Congress didn't even read it.
Yeah, it's got a lot more theater to it than it does any kind of legal significance.
It's very interesting.
Judge, thank you so much. Great to have you.
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
sir.
Good to be with you.
Next on Rising, AOC and Senator Bernie Sanders are teaming up to combat what they call the existential threat of climate change.
Sunrise Movement's Lauren Manis explains why she thinks their proposed official emergency declaration is not only appropriate, but does not actually go far enough. That when Rising returns.